Sandra?
Thank you. So I wasn't real sure exactly what the content was going to be today, but I tend to, when I do a Dharma talk, I like to spend some time on the naming process, and I'm not sure why I do that, but the thought that came to mind on this one was the book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Love in the Time of Cholera, only will replace cholera with COVID. And I'm calling this the Dharma in the Time of COVID. So what I did was I outlined this talk based upon the 3 questions that Elena had sent me. The first question being, talk about the suffering seen and felt in the midst of caring for others. So I happen to know that there's a lot of people on this call that do the same type of work, although in different settings perhaps, that I do. So I am also bringing them into this conversation. I posted, well, I'll get to that in a minute. So the first question about talking about the suffering scene. As most of you know, I work in Houston's Medical Center at a level 1 trauma hospital as an interfaith chaplain. And prior to this work, I spent 35 years as a board certified family lawyer, working with emotionally traumatized families as they go through some of the most difficult time in their lives. And I believe that helping the suffering has been what has driven my entry into these 2 vastly different professional settings. And so while we often talk about ways we should remove the suffering in our lives, preparing ourselves to go towards and sit with the suffering is the best way to teach us about ourselves and how to relieve our own suffering while tending to the suffering of others. And the second question was being in touch with one's own suffering, uncovering one's hidden sources of suffering, and understanding the impact of self-compassion informs our ability to unconditionally be there for the other and frees the compassion to flow unimpeded towards others. When I read this, I immediately responded to Elena that she's going to make one heck of a chaplain, just in the way she formats her questions. And so while I wanted to believe that I know much about myself due to the DTO coursework, the mentoring of the prisoners in the BCC correspondence course, and all the books, articles, and Dharma talks that I've read, listened to, and given, I don't believe I dove as deeply as I needed to in the practice until I became a hospital chaplain. I think the 1-year residency was tough, but a necessary step, allowing me to spend that full year trying to just understand who I am and how I got to this point in my life, and considering all my suffering. I learned about how much I fought against my understanding of organized religion as a whole and the damage that it can do, all driven by my own experience. And I'm thinking, well, therefore it must be right? Because I thought it and I experienced it. However, going through the experience of reuniting with my mom and therefore her religion at the tail end of my residency, and the religion that she embraced was the one that caused my post-traumatic church disorder. But once she moved in with me and then got sick and passed, that experience allowed me to see how much good connecting to the spiritual realm offered believers. My entire gaze at these religious people has changed. I don't agree with their understanding of things necessarily, but that's not as important in the moment of our engagement. The connection comes into full focus in that moment that cannot be described when you feel each other together, whether it's through pain or joy. However, I would have to admit that my most impacted teacher has been death. This opportunity to sit with death every single day affords me the unique opportunity to look it straight in the eye and say, okay, this is it. And realize that it's not as scary as I had thought prior to this job. Oftentimes, I'm the only one in the room that even brings it up with patients or family members, while the medical team and the family are doing their best not to consider that possibility, at least out loud. Our society has created a way to turn our focus away from death and make it something to not talk about and not welcome in. The word itself is spoken in whispers and away from the person that's dying. This avoidance allows me to bring to the forefront for both the patient and the family this unnameable topic. And it's like a pinprick when it happens. The patient, if able, seems to have been given permission then to flood the conversation about this taboo subject, their fears, their concerns for their families, and their own spirituality and the meaning this moment makes for them. Often the family thanks me separately for opening up this much needed conversation, allowing them to now listen to the patient and their vision for how this transition should look and feel, which is a gift to both the dying and the family at the bedside. The third question that Elena posed was, what personal meditation practice do I use in developing awareness of the various qualities of the breath that become a tool to help identify with another's condition and even without words, help them transcend their agony? And I'm not going to go back and revisit the story that I shared with y'all earlier, but there's countless stories. And it was kind of hard to pick just one, but my personal meditation practice really has two sides. And that those that are primarily directed towards self-care and those that are primarily directed at other care. Although I have to say that sometimes it's hard to see where one ends and the other begins. In caring for others, understanding that arriving in a space with another who is suffering physically, emotionally, and or spiritually, it's imperative to have no expectations and to not be thinking about anything but that moment. So my practice before I enter the room is always, of course, the Joint Commissions also require it, but with the hand sanitizer pump at the door, it's a practice that I've incorporated every time that I walk into the room, to take one pump of the sanitizer, and while I'm washing my hands, I take 3 full cleansing breaths, checking in with my physical body first, and then into my emotional body. When I'm with the other, deep listening is imperative. No interruptions, no fixing, just sitting, listening, and normalizing their feelings, whatever they may be. But most importantly, letting them know that they are not alone in this transition. As the conversation meanders, I have to continuously check in with my breath to remind myself not to try and offer solutions to their stated problems. I just merely ask them, how can I support you today? More often than not, I hear nothing, thank you, or just prayer, please. However, it is what is not said that is what I pay attention to. Noticing the room, where I can gain insight as to whether or not there's any sign of family, friends, or support. I notice the demeanor of the patient. They will often say, I'm good, but yet their facial expressions and their demeanor is incongruent with their statements. And I say facial expressions are truth tellers, not the words. And sometimes I just mirror what the other person is doing with their body. For example, if they're rocking, I will find myself rocking or leaning, touching, holding hands when that's allowed. I use my eyes, ears, and smile to inform me and the other. I use my breath to help me and the other. For example, when people are anxious in the surgical center, and they're anxious about their surgery, or they're anxious about the poke for the IV, sometimes I just tell them to just look at me and breathe with me. And we don't have to do much more than that. And their whole body tends to relax. I figure it's all samadhi, using the breath to distract from the object of the pain. I have pain. I am not pain, and the pain is not me. I will often ask for where their happy place is. And then I use whatever they tell me to create a guided imagery meditation to leave the hospital and their disease for a moment or two, as they engage with things that make them happy and light. I've cooked okra. I've gone on walks on the beach. I took an 84-year-old woman ice skating who didn't have any legs. I fished on a lake or hiked to a waterfall, all without leaving that room. All of these meditation sessions allow me to teach them about the ever-ready tool that is the breath. It's always free and it's always with them. And the most feedback I've been given from the others that I support at the hospital is just being present with them so they don't feel alone in their pain has been the #1 reflection. So for my own care, I know that I can't be of use to anyone else unless I first tend to myself. I'm super lucky that my director doesn't allow us to go very long without checking in on ourselves. We have morning and afternoon report that the main reason is for continuity of care and handoffs for the next shift, but it's also a place where we're invited to share about our experiences during the day. We're asked to name our feelings, which, to be honest with you, that's something that as a practicing lawyer, I never did. When I started my residency, I didn't even understand what they were asking me. So in ways that we're caring for ourselves, I've learned that intentional movement is crucial for my personal physical well-being. When we first shut down on March 11th, I began riding my bike 5 days a week, mostly just as a form of getting out of my house when I'm home and getting a little bit of exercise. It quickly became my therapy. It physically raises my endorphins as I elevate my heart rate and work my muscles. I use a form of meditation that I call savoring, where I direct my attention to things that bring me joy, like the wind on my face or sun, children playing and laughing in their yards, the birds singing, the dogs running and barking. Then I think about all the conversations I've had that day, or things that have been difficult for me to understand or experience. And I remind myself how lucky I am that I can even ride my bike when most of the people I care for cannot. I feel replenished after the ride, and then I can enter my home with a smile on my face and be with my husband without bringing the heaviness of my day home to him. I have many teachers that have helped me develop my own self-care, starting with each one of you. However, I've also picked up a few new favorites that I tap into every day for inspiration into my own well-being. And I was grateful to hear Craig share Joan Halifax. She has, and I think it's in Awake at the Bedside, a strong back, soft front meditation and approach to living. Another one is Frank Ostaseski's 5 Invitations. #1 being don't wait, instructing us to not waste our time on meaningless activities. Say I love you more often, even if only to ourselves. #2 is welcome everything and push nothing away. We don't have to like everything we encounter, but we shouldn't avoid it either. Meet whatever comes to us and learn from it. #3, bring your whole self to the experience. We all have flaws and shadows. It's those human undesirable traits in me that often allow me to connect with someone who may be suffering from those same frailties and meet them where they are with understanding. #4, find a place of rest in the middle of things. I have found stairwells and other places at the hospital that allow me just a few moments to care for myself, whether it's to have a good cry, just to breathe, or to look out the window at the giraffes in the zoo that's next door, all of which bring me peace. #5, cultivate don't know mind, or beginner mind as we call it. If we clutter our minds with knowing, it narrows our vision, crowding out any possibility of discovery. Being with my 21-month-old granddaughter is the best teacher for this one. Watching her see the world around her with such wonder and curiosity makes me want to live in that space of wonder all throughout my days as well. I'm not going to lie, COVID has been heavy. These are extraordinary times, but I also realize I'm just a mere mortal. So when it's time to go home or go into my office or go sit in my director's office and cry, I cry, and I cry hard. But those tears are not for me. Just like the practice of Tonglen, when you practice taking on the suffering of others, you have to likewise prepare a space for yourself. And I've been super lucky in that my director, who's not Buddhist, but understands the benefits of meditation, as he was a chaplain at the Mayo Clinic before he came to our facility. And he used to conduct daily meditation with the cancer patients there. And he encouraged me to begin that practice at my facility as well. So when I was hired, he asked me if I would also do, we're calling them relaxation sessions because we still live in the Bible Belt and meditation is still a scary word for some people. But I assembled a team, interdisciplinary team that helped to lead the meditation every day for our campus. First, we began in person in January in a little meditation room, and then we moved it to Zoom, which, as we have all experienced, more people started to attend because it's just so convenient. And I think about how lucky I am that I actually get paid to meditate every day. So I now want to offer a little guided meditation for the time that we have left. And this one is directly from Ostaseski's book. I hope if anyone's read it, this is going to be a very familiar meditation to you. I think it's a beautiful metaphor about meditation. So I suggest that you get your seats and let's get started. Get settled. Make sure your back is straight. And if you're in a chair, move away from the back of the chair so that you can get that natural curve in your lower spine, supporting your head over your shoulders and your shoulders over your hips. And then let's just take 3 big cleansing breaths together. Just feel the way gravity secures us to the earth as we find our natural breath. Don't force it, just let it come and go. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, you can pin my video. I put up the Aurora Borealis because I thought it was more appropriate for this meditation. So imagine that we're on a beach at night. The sky is completely black, save for the brilliant stars all around us, as there's no light pollution. We then step onto a long wooden boat. where we are paddled into the bay. Although it's dark and we're away from land, we're not afraid. The only sounds we hear are the oars as they pierce the water's surface in slow, methodical rhythm, and the lapping of the small waves against our skiff. As we get to our destination, we can see far off in the distance, the sky is lighting up as a storm is developing on the horizon. However, we're not afraid. We're going to go scuba diving. We pull our masks down over our face, place the regulator tube in our mouths, and then just let gravity pull us backwards into the water. We just float downwards slowly as we get further towards the bottom. We have to turn on our flashlight, guiding our way into the dark water. However, we're not afraid. Our cone of light enhances the life all around us. We see the beautifully colored fish that swim around us, seemingly unaffected by our presence with them, as we dive deeper and deeper into the darkness. Yet we're not afraid. When we finally reach the sandy bottom, we curl our feet up under us, sitting in the posture that is familiar, as we witness the wonder of this new subterranean world. The only sounds we hear are our slow, rhythmic breath in the regulator. We now turn off our flashlights, plunging ourselves into almost complete sensory deprivation. No light, no movement, just our breath and complete and total stillness. And we are not afraid. We sit like this for what seems like hours as we focus on our breath, the sound of it, which has been with us since birth, yet we mostly ignore it. And we know we're not afraid. So now we switch on our flashlights, seeing that our little sit at the bottom went seemingly unnoticed by the marine life around us. As we begin to straighten our legs, pushing off gently on the ocean's bottom, as we begin our slow ascent. We notice how our bodies move through the water without the struggles we encounter on the surface. No pains, no creaks, just fluidity of movement. As we begin to climb, we suddenly feel our bodies being tugged slightly by the currents, this way and that. But we remain unafraid. The closer we get to the surface, those currents become a bit stronger until we pierce the water's surface. Finding the waves have become larger, and we can see that the lightning that we saw as we went down has moved off, and the storm has now passed. The storm that was just going on above us as we sat below. That storm is past, leaving only the choppy waves behind us as we swim happily towards our boat waiting for us. We climb effortlessly inside and sit with a smile, knowing that it was the stillness of our sit on the bottom that allowed us to weather the storm ever present around us. And we know that we were never afraid. Let's just take 3 more full cleansing breaths before the sound of the bell returns us to this moment where we too remain unafraid. Thank you.